Hello, everybody, and welcome to this seminar and launch of the Fair Finance Guidance Swedwatch report titled Silent Approval, the Role of Banks Linked to the Crisis Faced by Borneo's Indigenous People and Their Forest. I'm Alice Blondell, Director of Swedwatch, an NGO that investigates and reports on the impacts of businesses on human rights and the environment. Do I need this, or can you hear me anyway? Okay, I have to have it, okay. Today, our collective focus is Borneo. We will address the links between Borneo's indigenous people, your savings, bank investments, and companies, and the allegations and the links between these aspects and human rights and environmental degradation in Borneo. We have collaborated with many on this project, including with the makers of the striking documentary, The Borneo Case, which is premiering on this Thursday, and also with the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation, Fair Action, and Swedish Consumers Association, which stands behind our report and the recommendations therein. After a clip that you will see from the film, my colleague Frida, who is sitting here, will present the report, Silent Approval. This will be followed by a panel discussion with esteemed guests that we have with us today from both the finance sector and from Borneo. To give you some context to what we're facing today and to bring it out of this room, of the 370 million indigenous people living in the world today, 1/3 live in extreme poverty. That is 10 times Sweden's population, living in a situation characterized by the severe deprivation of basic human needs, including access to food, safe drinking water, and shelter. Yet, 80% of our Earth's remaining biodiversity is safeguarded by indigenous peoples. Last year, Global Witness reported that 2015 was the deadliest year on record since they started recording for land and environmental defenders worldwide. Indigenous people were 40% of those victimized by these killings. Southeast Asia, where we're traveling to today, is one of the deadliest places for indigenous people. For land and environmental defenders. And this takes us to Borneo, where 1/3 of the population is indigenous people. They are also, indigenous people, the most likely to face the adverse effects of climate change. I read a couple of weeks ago that Borneo faced the worst floods in recent history, and these types of extreme weather events are likely to increase with the effects of climate change. What you will hear today is not necessarily new in terms of the challenges that have been faced by people on Borneo for decades. It's human rights and its environment, and it is critical. It has been in part fueled by logging, land clearing, and conversion activities, mainly from oil palm plantations, timber, and also from mining projects. So to bring us back to here, there are many initiatives and guidelines that we can work on to change this stream. And also we can think of ourselves in terms of what stakeholder group we are part of, and also ourselves as individuals, what can we do? And now I will hand over to the experts and to our moderator for the day, Lasse Bengtsson. Oh, you don't need
Thank you. I think I can have this one. Thanks, Alice. And hi, everyone. And I would like to just start with saying I think that in these challenging times with alternative facts, I think it's more important than ever with facts and with documentaries and with investigative reporting about things that are not in immediate focus, as maybe the rainforest situation in Borneo and Amazonas and all these other places are right now. There is a great challenge from other hotspots in the world, as everyone knows. So I'm so happy to be able to stand here and talk about Borneo and the rainforest there. I would like to start with the audience. I just asked you to say hi.
Hi. Hi.
Could you please tell me your name?
Yeah, my name is Carolina.
Yeah, and why are you here today?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm having internship at an organization called FIAN, and they work with the rights to food, which is all connected with the land questions. And I think it's very important to raise these questions and to see where the money is invested, and it's not okay if it leads to human rights violations. So, yeah.
How much do you know yourself about the situation, the present situation in Borneo?
I don't know so much at all about Borneo or the situation in Borneo, so that's why I'm here. Yeah, to learn more.
What are your expectations?
Yeah, to learn more. Yeah.
How important for you is it with banks? I mean, you are a normal citizen as well, I guess, with a bank. And how important is it for you that your bank is ethical in these issues concerning, for example, indigenous people and rainforests and environment?
Yeah, I think it's very important for me as a person, and yeah, it's good that you raise these questions so we can be more aware, all of us. Yeah.
Great. You will learn more about how you put pressure on your bank also later on.
That's good.
Okay. Thank you so much. I might come back to you. Okay. Very good. And now, before we see a clip on from this film, this excellent film, who will have its premiere on Thursday, I think. That's right. Stockholm Documentary Film Festival, Tempo Film Festival. Some words from the producers, Eric Pauser and Dylan Williams. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Tell me, both of you, the reason why you engaged in this.
Well, I made a film 15 years ago about Borneo, about the last nomadic tribe in Borneo, and the story has stayed with me since. The main character of that film disappeared 2 weeks after the film was shot, and nobody knows what's happened to him. He had a price on his head. As you said before, Alice, it's a great danger for people to engage. So we wanted to see what happened to Borneo, basically, and to the nomads and to the situation.
Dylan, it is a great challenge to cover these issues, and many people here in this audience have they have paid quite a high price. How much did you experience from that when you were making this film?
Well, we went initially to look for, you know, the story of a man who disappeared. And the first day we went to visit an activist who was working, and within 20 minutes of us going in, there were 5 police cars came outside, and we had to sort of run out the back door and were taken to another place. And we sort of, for me, who didn't know anything about this, I suddenly realized how they have to work, and the whole culture which is pressed down on people. And so we basically been going into Sarawak with cameras down our trousers to get in and film people, because it's illegal to film and to show this story. And for me, I just want to say one thing. Why I did this was I sat on a train and someone was looking at a picture of a rainforest and they turned the page because there's a social distance. I don't know what I can do about it. And I got involved because I thought we all actually have responsibility and to try and find what we can do. So.
And I think it's quite fitting that you yourself present this short clip. It's a short clip from a film that is more than 1 hour, and it's I saw it myself a couple of days ago, and it's brilliant. So what do you say to introduce this clip?
I think, I mean, you see the images of the beautiful rainforest, and you see what happens when it's cut down out of greed, and you see the people who are affected in the film, and you get hopefully you close the gap between here and there, I would say.
Thank you. Let's see it.
This story began over 30 years ago, deep in the Borneo jungle. With an unlikely friendship between a Swiss environmentalist and a local tribesman who united to lead a rebellion to stop the logging of the land.
These last primary jungles here are getting locked from civilized, already well situated people against the will of these last nomadic people.
We have been in the forest, in the jungle, and these are our properties. And when people come in, it is like they're coming into our house and steal and take things away without our permission, you know?
As the stakes grew higher, those on the other side began to fight even harder, as one of the friends disappeared in the jungle, never to be seen again. And the other was forced into exile far away.
How can a civil servant amass a personal fortune of $15 billion? Easy. Just destroy the very rainforest you have been entrusted to protect. That's the charge being leveled against this man. His name is Taib Mahmoud. How did this gentleman amass such a fortune?
We return to Borneo as the fight to save the last pocket of virgin rainforest intensifies. And we follow as the battleground moves onto the international stage.
Everyone knows there is huge corruption involved in the tropical timber business. Interpol has estimated that more than $30 billion are laundered a year. We have to tackle this system and we have to follow the money.
My family and myself are doing well. It has nothing to do with exploitation, taking anything out of this country.
We've linked Taib and those close to him to 400 companies in 25 countries.
I stand here to bring a message from the native people of Sarawak about the destruction of our homeland.
Outside, Frida Arounsavath, the researcher, the main researcher in this project for Swedwatch. Please.
Ja, precis. So again, thank you to all of you for taking the time to be here today. We conducted over 70... Oh!
Hi.
Stänger den.
Should we continue?
Yes. So Swedwatch conducted over 70 interviews with men and women from mainly 2 indigenous communities in Borneo. Then, together with a Fair Finance Guide initiative here in Stockholm, we interviewed teams from 7 Swedish banks who are invested in companies with operations in Borneo. So, as we heard, logging booms started in Borneo from the 1960s and onwards and are still ongoing today. It was followed by land concessions, for example, for palm oil, for mining projects, and also increasingly for planned hydropower projects. And this is to give you an idea of the areas of land that are allocated, targeted for development today. This is central Kalimantan province on the Indonesian side of the island. WWF estimates that with current deforestation rates, Borneo may lose all of its lowland rainforest by 2020, except for small pockets which are protected by the states. We also see that Borneo is an example of an environment where the states do not take the responsibility to protect the indigenous rights of their citizens. For example, Sarawak's former chief minister, Abdul Taib bin Mahmoud, who you saw in the film, he stands accused of facilitating large-scale forest destruction during his 3 decades in power, while, as you saw again, amassing an enormous fortune for himself and for his family. The report takes its starting point in 2 important international conventions, international standards. The first one is the right of indigenous peoples to always be consulted before any development on their traditional land. We call this the principle of free, prior and informed consent. The second international standard is the protection of traditional forests. So indigenous peoples use rainforests, other forests for community needs and also for cultural and religious practices. This is protected under a special methodology, the High Conservation Values methodology, and ultimately under the Convention for Biological Diversity. Swedwatch interviewed lawyers and human rights activists in Borneo. Here we see the respected indigenous lawyers from Sarawak, Mr. Sichi Hao, Mr. Barubian, Mr. Harrison Lang Ngao. They themselves and also the communities that they try to help to get back land, get back forests, they are exposed to violence, intimidation, and also sometimes people are killed when they are seen as someone who is opposing company activities. This is happening today, and it happened also in the 90s. It's systematic, it's ongoing. Here is a 1993 indigenous blockade trying to protest logging operations on indigenous land. There are other efforts in trying to strengthen indigenous communities. Many projects and civil society organizations support indigenous peoples in mapping out their land and trying to gain formal land rights. This is often an uneven race against the takeover of land by companies and projects. This study zooms in on a small sample of 4 companies. We have the German bank, Deutsche Bank, IOI Group, which is a palm oil company, AAK is a Swedish palm oil importer, and finally BHP Billiton, which is one of the world's largest mining companies. And we see that most of the Scandinavian banks, Danske Bank, Handelsbanken, Länsförsäkringar, Nordea, SEB, Skandia, and Swedbank, they hold shares in these 4 companies. Scandinavian actors are comparatively small compared to other international financial actors who also are shareholders in these same companies. So examples of larger actors are Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and BlackRock. So why is this important for us as consumers, as bank customers? When it comes to palm oil, we know that according to some estimates, palm oil is present in up to 50% of the goods on supermarket shelves. And there is a risk that palm oil may be produced on land which has been taken away from indigenous traditional landowners. Also, our savings, insurances, pensions are often in the form of equity funds. And these funds may then contain shares in companies with operations in Borneo. The survey was quite extensive in Borneo. I will give you just a few snapshots from the people that we met and the voices that we heard. This is an elder from the Long Teran village in Sarawak, Malaysia. They have been affected by palm oil development by the company IOI. So the woman said they came out without consulting us, the landowners. They brought heavy machines operated by Indonesian workers to clear our gardens, our trees. I was scared and cried. A group of men who used to be traditional hunters in the Maraway 1 village, which has been affected by the coal mine, they told us that the Biriwit forest provided so many benefits for their communities. That's where they hunted, they found wild foods, medicines, etc. And now this forest is out of bounds. It's for the community, it's patrolled by the coal mining project staff. And they told us how difficult life was now, especially for the poorer people in the community who were struggling to practice agriculture, struggling to find enough nutritious food for their families. Village leaders such as Suwanto, who is the head of Maraway village, they told us how they are really worried about the future of their communities. Young people are moving away, livelihoods are increasingly difficult, and they do worry about the survival of their communities, their cultures, and also their languages. Now is a very short summary of the bank survey. So we see that very encouragingly, the Swedish banks have generally strong policies protecting indigenous rights to consultation and consent, and also high conservation values. When we look at the bank's actions in the 4 cases where the 4 companies have acted in breach of international standards, we see that in the palm oil case with the IOI company, the banks are aware, but they do not consider it verified that the company has acted in breach of conventions. They do communicate with the company, which is very positive, but they have not put forward clear demands for improvements. The BHP Billiton coal mine case has not been prioritized for action. The weaknesses in AAK's risk management when they import palm oil have not been identified by the banks, and the banks have not acted on the fact that Deutsche Bank has provided loans and financial services to former Chief Minister Taib. And this is again just a summary to say that there are shortcomings in the bank's actions, and in no case has a bank been given a green light in this study. Scandinavian banks have very important strengths that we found in the survey and which can be built upon for the future. They have a strong dialogue with us as civil society. They also have dialogue with the companies. This is very important, very positive. And in the palm oil case, the investments are very small, but the banks have still allocated resources to react, to do some analysis. And finally, the banks are part of global investor initiatives on human rights, where investors and banks come together to put pressure on whole sectors, the mining sector, the palm oil sector, and sometimes targeting special companies to put pressure. They're already change agents, and this is where we see that these forums could also be used to raise the particular issues for the support of indigenous people's rights. Briefly, the main recommendations from the study. To banks and investors, we recommend that they should clearly communicate to companies that they have a zero tolerance for development on indigenous land without consultation, without compensation. And when it comes to destruction of indigenous forests, dispossession of indigenous land, it is not an option to be reactive. The banks have to be proactive. The consultation, the solutions need to happen before the mine, before the palm oil project. And you see, this is a satellite image of the village with a coal mine. The white lines are the coal mining concession, which is now out of bounds for the community. But today the forest is still standing. There is still a chance to re-engage with the community, to give back key areas to the communities. And we also see that some banks have raised the issue that the cases in the study are old. For the communities, the cases are still ongoing. As long as they do not have their land, as long as they have not been compensated, the case is not old to them. This is the same thing in the palm oil case. Almost half of the concession has not yet been developed. This is a window of opportunity for positive pressure from banks and investors. And we also want to point out that indigenous peoples' communities are sometimes small. The cases may seem small to banks, but together it's a systematic problem, and the many small cases form a great negative impact. States always have the ultimate responsibility to protect their indigenous citizens' rights. And we recommend to Indonesian, Malaysian and Swedish governments to sign and ratify the key convention, the International Convention on Indigenous Rights, the ILO 169. To the Swedish government, we also recommend that there should be compulsory risk management for the financial sector, human rights due diligence. And finally, we hope that all of you today will communicate to your banks. All of us as consumers, as bank customers, we have a voice, we have a consumer power, and we know that Swedish banks do listen to their customers. So here is a very simple recommendation, a format where you can express your voice and demand zero tolerance for developments on indigenous land. I finalize with a quote again from one of the interviewed men in Sarawak. They are in the middle of a very difficult mediation process with the company, and he's asking, if we lose everything, where can we go? We are not animals, we have a purpose and we have our way of life. So thank you again for being here, and as bank staff, as consumers, we all can do our part in this difficult issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frida. And you will come back for the panel discussion later. No, you will not. Okay. You learn new things all the time. I will tell the audience that we are taking questions from the audience later on, after the separate discussions here. Now I will ask our distinguished guests from Malaysia and from Great Britain to come up here, and from Indonesia also, from Borneo. You are so welcome, all of you. Can everyone hear you if you speak? Welcome, Clare Rewcastle Brown, very famous investigative journalist from Great Britain. Yeah. And we have also Mutang Urud from Sarawak province. Welcome, Mutang.
Thank you.
And Arounsavath from the Indonesian part of Borneo. Welcome, all of you. These, both Clare and Mutang are featured in this film made by Eric and Dylan. And for me, who saw it the other day, I was very impressed by your work. It's a fantastic work that you have been done, and it has also been quite hard for you at times. I mean, you, Mutang, you live right now in exile in Canada. Can you start to explain why you have to be living outside Sarawak, your own home country?
Thank you for organizing the panel discussion this morning, and to all the groups that have come together to organize this. Thank you for moderating this for us, and the audience. Because of the snow, I thought nobody would come, but you are all concerned Swedish citizens. That is very good. That's why we come here. But anyway,
you're used to snow from Canada.
Yes, I ski. Yeah. I don't like it when there is no snow. But that said, I grew up climbing trees when I was young in Sarawak, and I used to wonder what all the people living above those mountains used to be or look like, what their houses are like. And then until the logging company came. And then I took interest in it, not very soon, but much later. And then I got involved. The blockade that you see here actually was the beginning. It was the beginning of that blockade that I was arrested and put in jail. And so, put in jail for in solitary confinement. So I had to flee the country for a short while to the Rio conference in forum there. And then I stayed in Canada just to study for a bit, and then it was not possible for me to come back to Sarawak, and so I had to seek refugee status in Canada. So that's why I am now in Canada.
When were you in Sarawak and Borneo the last time?
Well, I took citizenship in Canada because I really wanted to come back to Sarawak. And it was about 2000, after 20 years, I went back. So I have been going to and fro now to do work in Sarawak almost twice a year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Arounsavath, if I start, Claire, with the guest from Borneo, if you don't mind. Ari, you are leader for the organization WALHY Kalteng.
Yes.
Yeah, and that is an organization supporting the fight of the indigenous people in Kalimantan. That is the Indonesian part of Borneo. And you are also an expert in forestry and palm oil. And you are from one of the Dayak people's groups.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you please, if I just ask a question to the audience here, I think that could be interesting. How many of you have been on Borneo? If you raise your hands, just so we get, I mean, this is 5, 6, 8, maybe 10 people in the audience of all, so that is also something that we should understand here. Describe for everyone who doesn't exactly know what's happening there, what is, from your point of view, what is the most important thing happening right now on Borneo?
Yeah, I speaking in Indonesian. Jadi Kalimantan, kalau bahasa Indonesia, dia menyebutnya Kalimantan, tapi kami disatukan dengan sebutan Borneo sebagai satu kesatuan antara Indonesia dan Malaysia. Situasi hari ini tentu masyarakat adat adalah masyarakat Dayak, itu yang menjadi pemilik utama dari sumber daya alam yang ada di Kalimantan. Tapi sejak zaman Soeharto dan hingga saat ini ruang-ruang itu sudah diambil dan dikuasai oleh tambang, mulai dari HPH, logging concession, kemudian tambang dan sawit. Hampir dari total wilayah itu hampir 80% itu sudah diberikan konsesi, dikuasai oleh investasi. Dan masyarakat adat Dayak yang tinggal di sana itu sudah mulai kehilangan hutan mereka, dan hutan bagi masyarakat Dayak itu adalah identitas mereka. Dan ketika itu hilang, itu mereka akan kehilangan identitas sebagai masyarakat adat jika hutan itu hilang.
Yeah.
So the name the real name of the Borneo is called Kalimantan, and as a today's situation, the citizen of Dayak is the original owner of the land, but since Suharto, the second president, the land has been taken for mines, coal, and also palm oil. 80% has been taken for the infestation. And since then, the forest has been lost. And when the forest is lost, the identity of the Dayak people also get lost.
Mm-hmm. So what you are saying now is that 80% or maybe even more of the rainforest is already taken away from you.
Ya, di sisi lain investasi ada juga penguasaan hutan kawasan lindung, yang itu di dalam undang-undang di Indonesia masyarakat adat itu menjadi ilegal hidup di dalam kawasan lindung. Ini jadi persoalan juga, dan saat ini mereka terus mencoba memperjuangkan hak-hak mereka, termasuk dengan perusahaan BSP Blitten, bagaimana mereka memastikan hak-hak mereka terhadap wilayah itu diakui oleh negara, termasuk juga diakui oleh perusahaan yang tiba-tiba mengambil wilayah mereka tanpa persetujuan atau FPIC yang sesuai dengan prinsip-prinsip yang dideklarasikan oleh PBB.
So now there's another side of the investment that the states also saying that the tribe, the indigenous people, is illegal, and so that's one of the reasons that indigenous people try to fight that cause. So they are trying to make sure they get their rights back, as stated from the UN law.
Motang, can you explain to this audience what the rainforest and your home, what does it mean for the people there? Explain that to us.
Well, imagine you are in a room like this, but the room is much bigger, cooler and darker, almost like this. And when you are in the rainforest, the canopy is really high. And you hear all these sounds of birds, of insects, and millions of them. And sometimes when you go at night, it's very frightening. And but also the rainforest to us is not just frightening, but also, of course, that's why we believe in spirit and how you should be guided to do things in the rainforest. But also it's a source of our livelihood, of our survival. So if you take that away, then it's very hard for people to support their life. And when I was young, I used to climb up trees and get my energy from fruits, sugar from the fruits and all that, and just go out everywhere to look for food, fishing, using your hands, looking for fish in the water, or climbing of trees for fruits, or on the ground, or in the canopy. But also that's as a young person, but also we do cut the forest to make field, to make paddy field. But of course the authorities like to say that we are the one who caused the destruction of the rainforest, but for hundreds of years we've been living in the rainforest, we didn't destroy anything.
Claire, you grew up there yourself?
Yes, I also grew up climbing trees, Mitai, which is why I care so much, I guess. I then came back to Europe and had a career as an investigative journalist, and then went back, and I was so, well, I had been following what was going on, but to go back, to fly over what was once a great memory in my mind was flying over when I left at the age of 8, this hours of rainforest beneath me, now replaced by palm oil. And the scale of the devastation, I had to find out why it was happening. And I investigated it, and I came to the conclusion this is an issue of governance. This is driven by corruption of individuals, of a few number of people who are making massive fortunes. And so therefore it's a crime. And I do think this has to be understood and addressed. Anyone who's trying to deal with these situations, engage in productive ways, needs to understand that you have this fundamental problem, which is criminal governance. And that needs to be understood. It needs to be broadcast. I think a great deal of money goes into PR by the governments concerned, who have been getting away with a very light treatment on this. And, so you do have to confront at that level what is going on if you're going to start trying and dealing with the other aspects of the problem.
So, and as we can see in this film also, one of the main characters here is Taib Mahmoud, the former First Minister of Sarawak. Explain to us what is happening there right now. I mean, your investigations and investigating all his connections to all these banks and companies and everything like that, he amassed a massive fortune. Explain how much it was.
Unbelievable. I mean, you got a sense of his power from that curtailed clip. He has he's still the governor of Sarawak, and he had not only total political power, but he used that to gain total economic power. He and his family have basically taken over the economy of that enormously rich country. And one of the jokes about Taib Mahmoud is that he gets cross when people call the Sultan of Brunei the richest man in the world, because he can't admit that actually he's far richer. I've spoken to people who followed his business throughout their careers, timber merchants themselves, and they reckon he's worth 60 billion. And that does not surprise me at all.
60 billion US dollars?
Yes. And of course, one of the interesting things is and one of the things I've been following. I spent several years looking at how his family and himself, basically any concession that is given out, it's all about the kickback to them. So a timber concession, a contract. It's all basically the hidden kickback, and IOI, for example, will come in and buy a concession, but they'll be buying it from another company that's already that's the profit, and companies like IOI have to look at that. What's interesting also is how the financial system facilitates both the borrowing of the money to cut down these forests, but then the extraction of those profits for investment abroad. And that's one of the key issues that I've been looking at. How people like Taib get their money out and into vast property empires around the world, for example in America, where they have massive property developments.
This investigative reporting, Claire, has come with a prize for you. You are also sometimes followed by agents in London.
Well, yes, I'm actually banned from Malaysia. I have been for some time, indeed, last year the Malaysian government tried to issue a red notice terrorist alert so that I could be arrested anywhere in the world and extradited back for Malaysian justice. They hit back hard, and I certainly can't, I have to be careful about visiting that side of the world.
When were you there last time?
2010, I remembered. I snuck across the border, and it was quite frightening because I nearly got picked up looking at a logging, devastated logging area, but I nearly got picked up by the police, and if I had been, I'd have been in trouble, so I've not gone back since then.
But now, we we heard that so much of the rainforest is already gone, almost 90%, and there is reports that it could be totally wiped out 2020 or something like that. Is that the figures are those correct figures as you see it?
Well, it's a race for time.
It's a race for time.
You know, it almost is totally wiped out. Most of what we're looking at now is secondary jungle that we're seeking to preserve, or even tertiary jungle and worse, that we're seeking to preserve against the desertification of the monoculture that is oil palm. And really you are turning verdant green jungle into desert when you allow that conversion. And the effects are enormous. I mean, the rivers become clogged up with mud, the fish die, the entire area, which was the most biodiverse on the planet, becomes a desert. And think of the consequences of that. It's a very large, the third largest rainforest in the world.
Mutang and Ari, you're fighting for these remnants of the pristine jungle here now. What does it still mean to you to have this struggle right now?
Let me also continue with what Claire is saying about desertification. You look at Haiti and what's the next country with it?
Dominican Republic.
Dominican Republic. You see the difference between the two countries, where one is a desert.
Exactly.
And you think that tropical rainforest would never become a desert, but yes, it can. Look at Madagascar. And these are impact of what constant cutting of rainforest, and this could happen in Borneo. And for us now, the figure, the statistic is 90% or 80%, but well, logging is not clear cutting here in Sarawak. It's in some places, but they do clear cut for oil palm. So for indigenous community, I mean, it's also our rights to our traditional territory. That's what we are fighting for. And once you don't have those rights, and because the government said these are state land, so you have no inheritance, you have no ancestral rights to those lands again. So that's why we are using the court system to fight against the government and against the timber company and against the oil palm company at the same time.
Ari, when we're talking about the fight for your sakes here, is there any progress at all? I mean, if you start with explaining, when they started to take all these forests away, how were you compensated in any way at all, or how did the compensation look? What was it? Did you get anything for your homeland?
Iya, jadi ini adalah seperti bahwa yang saya perjuangkan untuk menyelamatkan hutan, menyelamatkan lingkungan, itu adalah memperjuangkan keluarga saya, keluarga kecil saya, anak saya, keluarga besar saya yang hidup di hutan di sekitar Pulau Borneo, dan generasi mendatang. Karena hutan itu adalah harapan satu-satunya bagaimana hutan sebagai paru-paru dunia, tapi saat ini sudah digerogoti dan sudah penuh dengan lubang tambang, penuh dengan sawit dan HPH. Dan 2 tahun lalu kami mengalami bencana yang paling besar, di mana keluarga kami hampir semua di wilayah di Kalimantan Tengah itu menghirup asap dari kebakaran hutan yang dalam jangka waktu 6 bulan itu hampir 2 juta hektar yang hilang terbakar. Itu karena keseimbangan ekosistem itu sudah rusak. Nah, sehingga apa yang kami perjuangkan dan kompensasi apa yang kemudian kami dapatkan, ini adalah kompensasi untuk generasi mendatang. Dan masyarakat, komunitas orang Dayak, karena dia hutan adalah sumber penghidupan mereka, sungai adalah darah mereka, dan mereka akan pastikan untuk terus berjuang tergantung dengan berapa besar ancaman yang mereka dapatkan, tapi mereka terus melakukan perjuangan itu.
So this is my fight. I'm trying to save the forest, to save my family, my kid, and also my big family in the forest for the next generation. I think the forest is hope, but it is now being taken away. There's so many holes in the forest. And 2 years ago, our family, we have a big disaster when we got the smokes from the burned forest. Within 6 months, we get 2 million hectares of forest get burned. So that's what we get, and that's what we're fighting for the next generation. The community of Dayak is now keep fighting, no matter how difficult it is.
Mutang, can you see any progress in the connections between your peoples and the governments at all? Is there anything to be reported here?
We saw a window of opportunity, a stream of small light coming 2 years ago when Adnan came into power, and he was stopping license for logging and oil palm and all those things. But he just died last month. And so we are hoping that the new chief minister in Sarawak would continue his legacy, which I doubt. Do I see any change? Of course. I mean, if we don't see any hope in all of this, it's really no point to continue fighting. It's not just only in Sarawak, but also in other parts of the world, like you talking about in Amazon, how we as indigenous people, like my brother here is saying that, you know, it's our own selfish family business, but also, like he said, our world is also, the rainforest is also the land of the earth, and so we are protecting all of us in that way.
Claire, as a reporter here, can you see anything positive happen at all? I mean, right now the Malaysian Prime Minister is on his way down, maybe? I don't know. What's the situation there?
Well, that's what I do. I report.
There has been massive demonstrations in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur.
Well, what I've done is to try to expose this, and you know, I exposed the corruption of these state leaders, and that had no traction against the federal government, and so I started looking into the Prime Minister himself, and obviously managed to start to expose his corruption in the form of the largest kleptocracy case currently being investigated in the world. So he has now been exposed as someone who's stolen over $1 billion personally into his own bank account, which we've been able to prove, and he has to account for another 7 billion that have gone missing from the same fund. So this has had an effect. The people have now got the proof, the information that yes, this is about criminality, it's about criminal government. And he has faced massive demonstrations, calls for him to resign naturally, and indeed the Department of Justice in America is currently in the process of pursuing a criminal indictment. So they've already confiscated large numbers of assets relating to this particular scandal. The Prime Minister has reacted by digging in his heels and instituting a crackdown against his political critics, against civil society, particularly against journalists, and hence my terrorism, you know, arrest warrant. So you know, you have a battle, and as a journalist, your battle is through words and the truth. I would hasten to add, added by you know, positive information that I've been able to bring forward. I would like to just pick up on something that Mutang said, which is looking at this whole issue of the wider network of criminal timber corruption. The companies in Sarawak were turbocharged financially by the rampant deforestation that happened when Mutang was little in the 80s. And they've taken that money and they've branched their operations and their modus of operandi, which is bribery of political, of the politicians of the countries that are able to give out the concessions, and they are everywhere. They're in the Congo, they're in the Amazon, and the other thing that's very characteristic of timber corruption is the violence and the gang models, and that's something we haven't really discussed. These communities are being daily directly threatened, and this is a heavyweight, brutal industry. There are lots of nasty things being used: guns, scythes, big machinery. These are all very threatening things that are brought into these villages, and there is and also there's the weapon of rape. I went up to a number of these villages and had a heartrending time interviewing young women who had been raped by the loggers. And the police were after me for interviewing them. They weren't after the loggers for the crime that they committed. So it's a really gross and violent crime that's globalizing through these mafia companies, many of which are attached to the politicians who run Sarawak.
You cannot come back there yourself, Claire, at this moment, and Mutang lives in exile in Canada. And how about you, Ari? You are still living there. What's the situation, the security situation for you right now?
Ya, bagi saya tidak ada pilihan lain untuk tetap tinggal di sana dan berjuang bersama masyarakat, karena kita sedang berjuang terkait dengan harapan. Jadi harapan saya, di mana ada masyarakat Dayak dan masyarakat adat yang tertindas, di sana pasti ada perlawanan. Bagaimana saya sebagai orang Dayak dan juga bekerja di organisasi lingkungan hidup yang berbasis pada advokasi, ini berjuang bersama untuk merebut kembali hak-hak yang memang sudah lama dirampas oleh investasi dan juga negara yang juga berperan dalam memberikan izin dan mempercepat penghancuran hutan dan menghilangkan identitas orang Dayak itu di hutan mereka.
So for me, there's no choice but to fight with the people. We want to make hope, and when the Dayak people is suppressed, there will be fight. And me, as the Dayak people, want to get our right back. So, and also for our country, because they didn't help us with our rights, so we're trying to get it back.
This is a seminar about the Swedish banks and the involvement in all this. What do you say, if you just try to explain to all of us, what can you expect from the Swedish banks in this case here? Shall we start with you, Mutang?
Yes, we're probably, I'll come back to that, but I just want to say that actually I always say that I live in a country which is very prophetic in Canada, where they are dealing a lot favorably with indigenous people, even though you hear about some negative things. But these are the kind of government that we want, that I foresee Sarawak will shift into, the democratic country that sees the rule of law, like Sweden, for example, where you can negotiate with the bank to correct or to put right what is wrong. So I see this as the way how the future government in Sarawak or Malaysia would be, and I have hope that we all are, as we turn to one source, which is education, following the Western life. I mean, that we all hope to be in a democratic world. I mean, not unlike the south of my border, which is not a good model. But to answer you, without naming anybody, to answer you in terms of the bank, I think we are now, of course, more than ever, very globalized world, and not one of my action is not affected. I mean, my action here, what I buy, what I do here, affects my village. Why? Because money from here goes to do things there, and whether it's for good or for bad, it does impact us directly. So to me, that's the good thing about bank and also the bad thing about them, because they help to destroy the rainforest, giving money to tithe to the logging companies, to the oil palm companies.
Ari, what do you expect from the banks, the Swedish banks, talking about them right now?
Ya, saya kira bank di Swedia dan juga di Eropa itu harus bertanggung jawab, karena dengan investasi yang mereka berikan itu kemudian akan memperburuk situasi masyarakat adat, akan memperburuk hutan di Indonesia, dan juga akan berimplikasi pada lebih luas bicara soal perubahan iklim. Jadi tentu harus ada prinsip-prinsip pertanggungjawaban, prinsip-prinsip transparansi, dan itu bisa secara akuntabilitas bagaimana investasi itu berjalan dengan baik. Bahwa kita tidak mungkin hanya memikirkan masalah ekonomi saja, masalah uang, tapi kemudian ada di sisi lain untuk kepentingan itu hak-hak rakyat, hak-hak masyarakat adat, dan juga hak-hak untuk keberlanjutan lingkungan itu diabaikan karena investasi-investasi yang tidak bertanggung jawab. Saya kira kita butuh satu perubahan paradigma dalam investasi dalam menginvestasikan, bank-bank yang menginvestasikan pada industri-industri ekstraktif yang itu tidak berkelanjutan.
I think the bank in Sweden have to take responsibility with their investment, because that investment can make things go worse, and it can also take the right of the people and also the climate. And the good investment can not only think about, should not only think about money, but also the people's right and also the environment. So we need to change the mindset to get this right.
Claire, you started the Sarawak report some 7 years ago now, and this has been an uphill battle also. I mean, you started with the small resources, and now the engagement in your cause has been growing quite a lot. And I mean, now you're getting out to hundreds of thousands of people all the time. Can you see any positive change here in people's minds talking about these issues? For example, in Britain, how is the situation there? Are people engaged in this? Do they feel that this matters for them, engaging in banks and talking about environmental issues, for example?
Yes, it's interesting. I deliberately actually decided with my media project to reach out to the local people and to the very many Malaysians who speak good English. And they're really, you know, they're my main target audience. And I have a very strong sense of having impacted on the debate there, you know, and I brought basically the values, the questions, and the investigative tools that you would expect to see perhaps back in Britain, and given them to the Malaysian media, which is very constricted locally, so they don't have challenging investigative journalism, you know, that it's not allowed. So I do that from the safety of the UK, dealing with their issues. It's very hard to bring these issues to the forefront in the UK. I think you're better here in Sweden. I think continental Europe is better than the UK and the US, actually, on these matters, where they tend to ignore a lot of these issues. So therefore, in a way, one does have to go straight to the audiences like the banking institutions, where they are having to follow these issues and to an extent make themselves aware of the situation. And I hope that by putting out this information that I have done and creating quite a large pool of readers, they are beginning to cotton on to the problems in Malaysia. It's hard to pretend you don't know what's going on in Malaysia now that there is some coverage, and now that you do have a major corruption case. So engaging with a place like Malaysia in a business relationship, I don't envy anyone who's trying to do it, Frankly, it's much easier for me being a reporter to say what's going on. I would not like to try to enter that thorny field of having any kind of relationship with a criminal regime, which is what banks dealing with Malaysian companies are having to do.
We are letting in the one brave Swedish bank represented here today, right now. But Claire, if I ask you, what is your question to SEB, the Swedish major bank here?
My question is, there's a lot of feeling that, you know, if a good bank or a good financial institution engages with these sorts of situations, it's better than, you know, allowing a bad bank or China or someone else to come in. And that, so therefore, by engaging, you can help to improve the situation. Now, experience tells me that that is a limited approach. It doesn't appear to have stopped the massive deforestation that we've seen in places like Borneo. What do you think about it?
Very good. Thank you so much. And I will get back to you afterwards with a final thought also. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now for Hans Ek, representing SEB, the Swedish bank, and also Jakob König coming up here, representing Fair Finance Guide, the Swedish consumers organization. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks.
Hans, you're a very brave man to come here.
Yes.
As the single representative for Swedish bank.
Yeah.
Do you feel bashed by all this?
Inspired, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
If we start with the first question, you heard the question from Claire?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your reaction? I think you should talk. Yeah, you should talk into that one, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Aha, okay.
My short answer is that I think that you are partly right. We need to expand our thinking when engaging. We've been focusing a lot on the top questions previously. Environment and corruption, which you mentioned. We didn't take the time to actually dig deeper down. But from our perspective, or what we have done previously, we learned that actually engage is better than selling off, because in this, this complex world, if we sell off, someone else actually takes on the equity. So we think engage more focused, and dig down to the question, and don't just stay with the obvious, like environmental corruption. That's my short answer. And we take with us this because I think when we had the discussion with Frida during the autumn, it was quite obvious in our discussion that we focus on corruption, environment, and didn't actually know so much about indigenous people, labor rights, and so on. So that's my thoughts on your question.
But you say engage better than sell off.
Yeah.
But, okay, in this case here with Borneo, how have you been engaging in this? Can you explain that?
Yeah. We've been in the IOY case. We had 5 million in index funds. We haven't engaged ourselves because it was such a small amount. More or less the same with BHP Billiton, the mining company, where we had about 50 million also in index funds. Where we engaged and have been engaging is in what is called SAM or AAK, where we have 500 million, I think. We have regular contact with them. I think we have been in the questions with them during a long time, because we felt if we are an owner with a stake, with a percentage or more, we receive a message, we have a voice. So we have been focusing on the companies where we have assets and where we actually decided to invest deliberately. There we engage. and those are around 700, including Århuskarlshamn or AVK.
And would you say that this engagement has done something concrete, positive? Has it meant anything in the real world, so to say, except contacts?
The last concrete example where we think we succeeded together with others was a UNPRI initiative around corruption, where we demanded on companies to be more proactive in how to present, internal rules, regulations around how to handle corruption. And I think we pinpointed some 15-20 companies where we saw progress over a period of 3 years in 60% of the companies. So if we focus on one topic or two with a specific company and actually, we are on them full time, we see change. But it's very hard to act on an array of different topics over the world. We need to focus.
Yeah, I understand that, but you are still, as far as I understand, you are putting more limited resources to these departments, this sustainability department, so to say, than, for example, the textile industry does. They have put more money into this and more people also. I mean, this is a matter of having enough resources to check things up. I can understand that. Yeah. Have you got enough resources today, or why don't you put enough resources into this?
You as a manager, never have enough resources. That's
no, of course not.
But I think
but still,
when I started,
being as good as the textile industry.
When I started in this position in SEB 7 years ago, it was half a person working with ESG in my bank. She's still with us, Christina. Now we are 4. So we have invested in personnel. But I think that's not the important thing. It's the collaboration with others, because we are such as we manage a lot of money in Swedish krona, but in the global context we are quite small. So collaboration under PRI with other Scandinavian investors is also very, very important. And then we add up both resources and assets and actually have our voice heard. So collaboration, and we have actually invested.
If I ask you, is there any value for you to invest more in this? Are bank customers interested in this? We heard one in the audience here saying that, yeah, this is really important. Can you feel this pressure from normal customers nowadays?
Yeah,
that they are checking you up?
Yeah. Partially, that's why I'm here. Yeah. We have constant, web messages, you have Facebook questions raised, and so it's a growing interest. And also from the corporate side, I don't know if you are aware of the RFP process, where investors ask us about the mandate. A couple of years ago, no one was interested in ESG as such. Today, about 25% of the questions are concerning ESG. So it's a growing demand both in retail private clients, but also from institutions. And we need to raise our bar continuously in order to be able to respond and to have new questions on top of our mind.
That means also more people and more money into this.
More people, more money, and much more collaboration and focus. Because you can't run everywhere. You need to prioritize and focus as well.
You come relatively good out of these in this study,
or equally bad.
Or equally bad. You are second.
Second among a lump under 5.
Do you feel comfortable with that? Or?
No, but discussion here. This discussion and the pros and between our interview and this occasion actually have learned a lot for me.
What,
and from
for example?
About the situation that is present today. Still, it has been discussed, I think, in the Borneo Case in the 70s, and it's still there. And I think you gave a message to me. We might say something about North Dakota. It's the same thing, but newer in time. But it's more or less the ground reason are the same. The industry world wants something, and in a quite opposite corner is the indigenous people.
You were engaged in the North Dakota pipeline?
Not engaged, but we were invested in one of the companies.
But not now?
No.
Why not? And what's the big difference here to Borneo?
That one, we had 500 Swedish krona, so we sold it.
Okay. Jakob König, representing, don't you have...
No, we share.
You share, okay,
yeah,
okay,
share.
Yeah. You are representing the Fair Finance Guide here, which is important for Swedish bank customers, for example, here. What is your reaction to the things we just heard here from Hans?
Well, we can see that people react very strongly to this report, and I think it shows this quite huge gap between what the industry, what the banks do, and what the bank clients and the public expect. And this is a gap that we're trying to shrink by offering this kind of monitoring and website, and people get to express themselves about their banks. But I think it's important to stress that. Well, you can see it from two sides, or there are two sides to it, that it's both a responsibility for banks to act responsibly regarding their investments, to live up to international conventions and norms, especially not only to their own policies, but to international norms and conventions. But it's also an opportunity side that banks can play change agent of change. And this is something that strikes me a lot when I compare it to Fair Finance Guide in other countries. We are in 9 countries now, and where we have a quite fortunate position where we can have a dialogue with the Swedish banks. Swedish banks are eager to take this role of being something positive, but they do it from a level that starts way below our expectations and the client's expectations. And this is a quite painful travel to raise to the level that is in line with what clients expect, what we expect, what international norms expect. But we should stress that banks can play a positive role, and we see the interest from banks in doing this. But it's not only that they do it when we dig up something, but rather that they have proper monitoring, they have proper due diligence of their investments, they have acted before we check them, before we raise issues. And that's, I think, the key issue. And also with the resources side, that we see really many talented people, engaged people in the banks working in these sustainability teams, but there are so few people to monitor these thousands of investments and engaging with them. That it's not dimensioned to the scale of the problem they have to manage. And here's the interesting comparison to the textile industry that is not perfect in any sense, but it has transformed the last 10 years from, like 10 years ago they said, we cannot check all our suppliers, we have thousands of suppliers. They don't do that anymore. They have really huge departments, management systems to really control that, you know, that their suppliers have proper working conditions, and they have fewer suppliers because otherwise it's not possible to control them. And I think the financial sector needs to transform in the same way. They need to scale up the resources, the monitoring, the due diligence, but they also need to scale down on the number of investments and be less of a passive investor in thousands of companies, because then there's a silent or not very engaged passive shareholder of those companies, and that does not put enough pressure on the companies.
Can we hear some promises from you now? You can have my mic here. I interview now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay.
I listened to him.
Yeah, and so fewer investments, fewer companies, more people in your department here. Is that the promise?
No, a comment. We have another way of seeing it, because before we had, you know, the specialist sitting in the corner and the manager sitting asking the specialists. now we want to educate everyone to actually include sustainability matters into ordinary management. It's not a side issue anymore. That's one comment. So a balance between education and adding more specialists. Mm-hmm. And the second comment is actually what we are doing. If we compare our global fund, 5 years ago, we had 400 equities. Mm-hmm. Today we have 80, but it's, you know, twice as much money. Mm-hmm. So information systems and information today enables us to focus on fewer companies, but actually don't solve the issue for the companies we don't invest in. Mm-hmm. So the problem might be still there, regardless if we focus on fewer and have a broader competence in our organization. Mm-hmm. That's why we collaborate as well.
Banks are quite eager to compete with each other. Isn't it important for you to be best in class here and first on this list next year?
Yeah, the bank SEB, where I work, want to be market leaders. We have no choice in our unit. Okay.
Jakob, want to comment on this? Is that a good answer from us?
Yeah, that's a good answer. I want to hear it from all the banks.
Then we have exactly. Yeah, they are not here, so.
Well, I think some of them are.
Yeah. Okay, they are. Yeah.
But I think I agree that to integrate these issues into the organization is something that would be good. But we see also weaknesses in doing that because you don't have the proper incentive systems for these other people that do other things, the portfolio managers, the asset managers. So, I mean, it's a good ambition to try to get them on board this ship of sustainability, and some of them want to, but when we check this more thoroughly, it's not really implemented in a proper way. It's not really sipping through all the way down to the people that should do it.
Mm-hmm. I know that time is flying as usual. Do we have enough time for some question from the audience here, or yeah? Do we have a mic for? Maybe I can come down to you here. I do.
My name is Peter Eriks, and I would like to ask the representative from the bank, how much money are your bank ready to lose by putting more emphasis on these issues that are discussed at the moment?
Nothing is my answer, as we believe, from our point of view, that we are investing, we are engaging more, and also responding to client demands now in a much better way today than just 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I think also being able to be open and transparent what we say we focus on and not. So a client can actually choose if you want to, okay, I want to liaise then with SEB or not, because you can follow what our focus is right now and our obligations and standpoints. But I don't want to lose anything. We are investing and we want to be better.
Okay. Another question here, please.
I'm not sure I understand all these complicated issues.
Okay.
But I wonder, how much feedback are the banks giving to the companies? And how are the companies reacting? How much pressure do the banks put on the companies? That's one question. The other one I'm thinking of, you're talking very much about working together with others, with other nations. How interested are the others, whoever they are? Are you in the forefront here, the Swedish banks, or where are you?
I think, on the second question, I think Scandinavian and New Zealand, Australian banks cooperate quite well together with, but on certain issues. That's our experience right now, under the PRI umbrella and with the northern Central European countries. Your first question, complex. The companies, I can give you an example. A Swedish company called Stora Enso experienced a human rights crisis some years ago, where we were heavily invested. It was about child labor in Pakistan. And we confronted them. We asked them to sit down with the CEO and the board and discuss how our view was on that subject. And my feeling is, together with other investors, other Swedish banks, we made progress in that discussion, and they actually changed their behavior during 12, 18 months' time, and decided to enhance their focus on rights for people in Pakistan and the cooperation with the vendor. So we feel nowadays, as their clients, the company's clients themselves are interested, their suppliers are interested, together with the bank, we can change together. But a growing interest during the past 5 years.
One last question here from audience. I know that everyone wants to leave soon because it's in the middle of the day.
Also a question for you, Hans. Do you consider it a material financial risk to invest in those companies that might be involved in environmental degradation and breaching of indigenous rights?
A financial risk, yes, of course. But I think if we don't do it the right way, it's more of a market or a client risk. So we suffer on our position in the market if we don't do this right. The financial impact immediately is quite small. So it's a long-term investing doing this right.
Thank you so much. I will ask a few questions to our international guests before we all leave. But thank you, Hans, for coming here and being brave.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jakob. Thanks. And contact Jakob as consumers on Fair Finance Guide. Okay, if you please, would you just step here so I can hear your reaction? Yeah. I'm just interested in a quick reaction from you. I mean, you are the main guests here today, and what do you say after listening to this conversation?
Well, of course, the banks in Sweden are less directly involved in places like Sarawak than others. But I have, the story of Sarawak is littered with appalling examples of where banks have exposed themselves to being shown up for the most dreadful behaviour. There are numerous banks that have now been exposed as having employed the most unbelievably sloppy attitudes towards siphoning and money laundering the hundreds of millions of dollars of the Prime Minister of Malaysia. There's too much compliance when it comes to very powerful political people on the part of banks who give us as individuals a very hard time on these issues. Banks have really got to wake up and realise their responsibilities when they're dealing with a criminal regime like Sarawak, Malaysia.
Mutang, maybe you can talk into that still, yeah?
Okay. Well, this is not a personal attack to anyone in the bank. But banks are not just institutions without human beings. So who can change policies, who can adapt their institution to what is right. I was just watching Big Short on the plane coming here. I realized that, well, of course, money, like Bruno said, is the king of the world. And banks, of course, is the one who grind the money around. And if the bank don't make money, and what are they there for? So it is a negative, a very, it's hard. It's hard for me to say that the bank can manage money well, but I hope that we all are moral and ethical beings, and we work within our own capacity, whether we are bankers or consumers. Thank you.
And Ari, a final word from Kalimantan.
Yes. Ini pesan yang kuat tentunya. Saya kira untuk investasi khususnya bank, ketika Anda berinvestasi dengan uang, itu Anda juga di mana investasi itu berdampak pada manusia dan hak masyarakat adat, Anda seharusnya juga berinvestasi terhadap kemanusiaan. Karena di sana ada masyarakat yang punya hak, ada masyarakat yang punya harapan, Anda harus punya investasi terkait dengan itu. Itu juga dengan ketika Anda berinvestasi pada aktivitas-aktivitas yang merusak hutan, yang merusak lingkungan, seharusnya Anda juga memikirkan investasi soal keberlanjutan lingkungan. Karena keberlanjutan lingkungan itu akan bicara soal generasi sekarang dan generasi yang akan datang. Ketika lingkungan rusak, hutan rusak, kita tidak punya planet lain. We don't have a planet B. So we must save the forest. And, yeah.
So this is a strong message for the bank, because when you invest, you not only have to invest for the money, but you also have to invest for humanity, for the people and their rights, because the people have hope. And when you invest for deforestation, you should also invest for growing the forest back, because if there's no forest, then there's no life.
Thank you all so much for coming here, and I wish that you will have a very nice week in Stockholm on the documentary film festival, for example. Thank you so much. One final word from Alice, the boss of Swedwatch.
I just want to say thank you to everyone on behalf of the project team that you came here today. Extra thanks for our guests from Borneo and to Hansiak for braving this room. But also, when we looked at those that were attending and those that registered for the event, we saw a very wide spread from across sectors. And I think we can take this with us to see that the dialogue that we've spoken about will continue, and that as you leave the room today, that you think of the descriptions that you've heard from our panelists of the rainforest that was flown over and that is now almost completely depleted. As you go outside in the snow and maybe eat a semla that may or may not have palm oil in it, just to keep these images in your mind and remember that we are all empowered for positive change. Thank you very much.